Hello, it's Annette here, and you're all very welcome. On this channel, I talk about how our early experiences subconsciously shape our behaviour and how we feel about ourselves. I draw on both my professional background, I'm a medical doctor, I'm not a therapist, and I draw on also my personal experience of a difficult childhood. Through my own experience of healing from my childhood, I developed a framework that I think is simple, clear, and easy to follow. And I call this framework the Hunter Method, understanding and changing toxic patterns. The Hunter Method is a structured way of understanding and changing the toxic patterns that develop from a difficult childhood. On this channel, I speak as an educator and I explain all about toxic patterns. I show how they develop and I teach practical ways to begin changing them. My channel is educational content. It is not a substitute for therapy or professional care. And now I'll walk you through the framework, the Hunter Method framework, step by step. The first part of my framework involves what I call our tales of repetition compulsion. But what is repetition compulsion? What does that mean? It's a psychological concept discovered by Freud. And in my opinion, if you had a toxic or abusive childhood, it's really important to know about repetition compulsion. However, if you notice, you rarely see it mentioned over the internet, and I think this may be due to the fact that for people who don't study psychology, and I'm one of them, it can be a difficult term to remember. But repetition compulsion is a very important part of my work, as you'll see in my videos. And I have a video in the pinned comment explaining what repetition compulsion is, and this will help you understand the concept. The terminology may be difficult to remember. The concept itself is very simple. It's simple to understand, and it was only when I learned about repetition compulsion did I begin to understand why my life had been so full of ups and downs and chaos and traumas and difficulties. I was actually in my early 40s when I finally heard about repetition compulsion, and I wish I'd known about it a lot earlier. And at the time, I was still dealing with upsetting incidents from my childhood, so I started working with a therapist, and his name was Pat O'Connor. I think I was very lucky to meet him, as he helped me make sense of my life. He did this by explaining repetition compulsion to me. You see, up until then, my adult life, as I said, had been full of personal struggles. The same letdowns over and over again, the same hurtful situations over and over again. I kept finding myself in toxic and sometimes even abusive situations. And I didn't know why this was happening. I thought I was doing the best at my life, but I kept coming across the same disappointments, the same hurt, the same repeating question of why was my life so difficult, even though I thought I was doing my best. I didn't want this chaos. I didn't want all the drama. I certainly didn't want all the hurt. Pat O'Connor explained to me that I was under the influence of a subconscious psychological process called repetition compulsion. And what that means is this. I explain it like this. When we have a difficult childhood, we often repeat the same emotional patterns in our adult lives, even when these patterns hurt us. And this happens at a subconscious level. We're not even aware that we're doing this. If you look at it like this is how I would explain it a little better. Children learn what they live. What they experience becomes their familiar, becomes their normal. And as adults, we are wired, are programmed, are compelled to repeat what feels familiar to us. And this again is all done at a subconscious level. So if we had a difficult toxic or abusive childhood, it's very likely that we will gravitate towards these same situations in our adult lives, because that's what is our normal and that's what's familiar. And we've no control over this happening because it's all subconscious. When I was made aware that I was repeating toxic patterns I had learned in my difficult childhood, this awareness changed everything for me. It was the start of my healing, because once something comes into your conscious mind, you can begin to challenge it. You begin to look at it and realize it's happening. You begin to see it. And when you can see it, you can start to make different choices. You can choose to stop repetition compulsion from continuing to control your subconscious mind. As I said earlier, in my opinion, the term repetition compulsion, it's not easy to remember, unless, again, you studied psychology. So on this channel, I decided that I would explain the whole concept of repetition compulsion through what I call our tales of repetition compulsion. And repetition compulsion invades every area of our lives. People think it just affects our relationships, but it doesn't. It affects every area. So I divided life into 8 categories, and I give stories, tales, or examples in all of these life categories. And the 8 life categories which I think are relevant are work, family roles, finances, relationships, health, learning, personal goals, and lastly, social interactions. Those 8 life categories are where repetition compulsion invades, every one of them. And then in the tales of repetition compulsion, I also use 2 fictional characters called Jamie and Eva. And I use these to tell you tales of stories from their lives to show again how repetition compulsion invades every area of our lives. In Tales of Repetition Compulsion, I hope to show you how we can repeat toxic patterns we learned in our difficult childhood in every area of our lives. By telling you these stories, or tales, I aim to make the concept of repetition compulsion easier to understand and relate to. And it's really important that you know about repetition compulsion if you had a difficult childhood. The second part of my framework is what I call the 6 bad messages. Now, working with the same therapist, Pat, I realised something else about myself. I had no self-confidence. I was always putting myself down, and I wasn't even aware that I was doing this. It just was automatic. I did it naturally. I did it subconsciously. So one day I sat down and I made myself write down what I really believed about myself, and I was shocked by what I wrote. I realised I was telling myself the followings. This is what I thought about myself. I am not enough. I am responsible for others. I can't trust my feelings or my instincts. I am bad and I am always wrong. I am alone. Nobody loves me. And lastly, I kept telling myself that I must be perfect or nobody will love me. I wasn't saying these things out loud to myself, but I was feeding them to myself subconsciously every hour of every day. These were the messages I was telling myself all the time. And the important thing to understand is this: most people who had a toxic childhood do this, and they don't realise they are doing it. Because these beliefs about ourselves were learned early, as in when we were children, they again became our normal. They became what were familiar to us, and they felt like the truth. I came to understand that these thoughts or messages about ourselves are damaged core beliefs that come from having a difficult childhood. And again, they're not the truth about who we are. So how do these damaged core beliefs happen? Where do they come from? If a child grows up in a toxic environment, the child does not blame their carers. They can't do that because they need their carers. So instead, a child blames themselves. A child thinks they are the problem. They start to think that they are not enough, that they are responsible for others, that they can't trust their feelings or their instincts, that they are bad and they are always wrong, that they are alone and nobody loves them, and lastly, that they must be perfect or nobody will love them. That's what the child starts to subconsciously think in a difficult environment. A child learns all these core beliefs subconsciously, and sadly, they carry these core beliefs into their adult lives without even realizing they are doing this. I ended up calling these damaged core beliefs the 6 bad messages, as we feed them to ourselves. We message them to ourselves constantly, and they are bad because they are not the truth about who we really are. Because why are they not the truth? They're not the truth because we are enough, just as we are, and we are not responsible for others, and we can trust our feelings and our instincts, and we are not bad, and we are not always wrong, and we are not alone. People do love us, and lastly, we don't have to be perfect for someone to love us. These damaged core beliefs are the 6 bad messages, as I call them. They don't just sit quietly in the background. They shape your confidence. They shape your decisions, what you tolerate, and what you believe you deserve. And since feeding ourselves the 6 bad messages is a subconscious process, in that we don't even know we're doing this, we are telling ourselves these bad messages all the time, and we're ruining our confidence by doing that. How do we stop it? Awareness. Awareness, again, is the first step to stopping the 6 bad messages controlling how you feel about yourself and controlling your adult life. Once you become aware that you are feeding yourself these bad messages, you can begin to challenge them. And this leads me to the third part of my framework, and it's called Nip and Flip. Nip and Flip is a simple method I developed to stop feeding myself these 6 bad messages. Once you are aware that you are feeding yourself the 6 bad messages, again, you can then begin to use Nip and Flip. You can challenge them. And it's a very simple way of retraining your mind to feed yourself good thoughts, or as I call, good messages about yourself. You stop feeding yourself bad messages and you start feeding yourself good messages. And I have a video on Nip and Flip in the pinned comment that explains this method in more detail for each of the 6 bad messages. But for this video, I'll explain Nip and Flip simply like this. To nip means to catch the thought as it happens, as it lands in your head. If you hear yourself saying, oh, I'm not enough, I'm just not enough, you nip it in the bud. You stop it landing and you don't give it airtime. You don't let that bad message tell you a lie about yourself. You nip it as it comes into your head, and then you flip it by replacing it with a good thought about yourself, a good message about yourself. So you replace the bad message with a good message, and over time you retrain your mind to develop good things about yourself, the truth about yourself. So if you look at the 6 bad messages, and let's say we take the first bad message, I am not enough. Instead of letting your mind tell you I am not enough, you begin to practice Nip and Flip, and you start telling yourself, I am enough. I am enough just as I am. I have plenty to offer, and what I offer is valuable. And let's take another example. If we take, say, the 6th bad message, which is I must be perfect or nobody will love me. Instead of letting your mind tell you I must be perfect or nobody will love me, you begin to practice Nip and Flip. And you practice telling yourself, I don't have to be perfect for someone to love me. I am allowed to make mistakes. I am allowed to be human. I am lovable just as I am. Now you're going to say, Annette, that sounds so obvious, but it's not obvious because these bad messages operate at a subconscious level. So we have to make ourselves aware of what they are telling us and when they are entering our minds. Nip and flip entails a conscious effort to catch the bad message before it can land, before it instills a bad thought into your head. You have to be aware that you are feeding yourself these 6 bad messages as we do this subconsciously. So you don't just change them by understanding them and understanding they exist. You have to actively, consciously choose to stop them landing and stop them influencing how you feel about yourself. You change them by catching them as they enter your head and then just switching them from a bad message to a good message about yourself. And you do this over and over again. It becomes a part of your everyday life. And at the beginning, when I started to do the nip and flip, I found it very difficult. I found it very kind of uncomfortable telling myself that I was good and I was good enough as I was. I found it difficult because I was so used to putting myself down, because in a sense you're going against thoughts and thought patterns that you've had for a very long time, and it's difficult initially to stop thinking like that, but with practice these new good messages begin to feel more natural. You begin to get used to them, and most important, you believe them. The good messages that you are now feeding yourself begin to change how you feel about yourself and how you behave in your life. And this all happens for the better. On this channel, I show you exactly how to use nip and flip. And if you start using nip and flip over time, you will notice how your confidence starts to develop, how you start to like yourself. You really do start to get confidence. I am a witness because this is what happened to me. The 4th part of my framework is something I call the toxic loop. I think I previously called it the hidden loop, but I think it's better to call it the toxic loop, because I think that better describes what's happening as I'm trying to describe toxic patterns and how they interrelate. So if we look at repetition compulsion and the 6 bad messages we feed ourselves, both are toxic, right? And if they both exist together, so they all feed into each other. The toxic loop is where everything comes together. So you look at it like this: repetition compulsion pulls you towards what feels familiar, even though it's toxic. And the 6 bad messages, they tell you who you believe you are, even though that is toxic too. And together they create a toxic loop because, as I said, they feed into each other. So you're drawn into toxic situations because they feel familiar for you. They are your normal, and you have no self-confidence due to your damaged core beliefs. So you can't stand up for yourself. So when you combine the 2 operating in your life at a subconscious level, you end up stuck in a never-ending cycle of getting yourself into toxic and abusive situations that you are not even aware is happening. You can't seem to get out of this situation. You can't get out of the cycle. It just continues on and on until someone, hopefully like me, makes you aware that these subconscious forces are operating in your life. Because as I say, how can you stop doing something that's harming you if you don't even know you're doing it? Somebody has to make you aware that these forces are operating in your life. Let me just sit up for a second. Sorry, Blasty. So when a person is caught in what I call the toxic loop, they feel like their life is just not working. It's not working out, that maybe they're unlucky, that they just keep ending up in the same awful situations time and time again. But the good news is, this can change once you are made aware that there is a toxic loop quietly repeating itself over and over again in your life. And it is happening again at a subconscious level. Once you begin to see this toxic loop, sorry Dottie, something important happens. You realize that it is not random. It's not bad luck. It's not your fault. There is a reason why you keep ending up in toxic and abusive situations. And once you know the reason, then you know how to stop this happening. All right, Blas? You can start to change your life for the better. An awareness of the toxic patterns that are operating in your life at a subconscious level is the first step in healing from a difficult childhood. Once you begin to see this toxic loop operating in your life, things start to make a lot more sense. You start to understand why your life has been so difficult. So awareness is the most important thing to start the process of healing. Awareness opens the door to stopping your difficult childhood from subconsciously controlling your adult life. So the fifth part of my framework is a concept I have called the double trauma. And this is something that I recognized in my own life. One day I was out walking the dogs and I was thinking, and it just occurred to me, it doesn't happen once, it happens twice. The first trauma is a difficult childhood. And the second trauma is what happens in adult life as a result of that childhood. Because when you have damaged core beliefs or the 6 bad messages, and you are under the influence of repetition compulsion, you are more likely to end up in toxic situations just like the ones you experienced in your childhood. So it can feel like life has just been maybe hard, has hit you hard twice. You first have a difficult childhood, and second, this then leads you to a difficult adult life. That's not fair, is it? You begin to realize that not only was your childhood difficult, but your adult life is turning out to be just the same as your childhood. Maybe lots of hurt, lots of betrayal, lots of toxic situations. So understanding the double trauma can bring a lot of relief because it helps explain that you are where you are, and what you're experiencing is not personal failure. It happens because a toxic childhood shapes our adult lives, and my channel is all about explaining why this happens and how to stop it continuing to happen. So the 6th part of my framework is where I call in some support in the form of the 3 wise tales. These are my dogs. Petal, she's on the floor down there. Blossie, can you see his head? Yes, there's Blossie. And Dottie, there's Dottie. These are my 3 dogs, and they're a constant source of love and support in my life. They helped me when I was beginning to break free from the control of the 6 bad messages and repetition compulsion. They always knew when I needed some gentle support. The 3 wise tales, they don't judge, they don't criticize, they don't send mixed signals, they never betray, they never hurt me. So I want to share this wonderful support system with you. And that's why I have them on the channel, that they appear on the channel in the form of what I call the 3 wise tales. Now, the 3 wise tales came up with the 7th part of my framework, and it's very simple. They're going to ask you a question. They're going to ask you, do you want to be a top dog, or do you want to be a cog? A cog means staying stuck in the old machinery of toxic patterns that you learned subconsciously in your childhood. And top dog means breaking free from those toxic patterns and beginning to take control back in your life. So the 3 wise tales will of course encourage you to be a top dog. But don't be surprised when they start asking you, do you want to be a cog? Top dog or cog is what they'll say to you. So finally, the 8th part of my framework is pause and pause. And these are just very short, light-hearted videos, and usually involving the 3 wise tales. And they're for just to give you a break, I suppose, from the heavier topics on this channel. because this work is really important that we're doing here, but it's also emotionally challenging, and then it's heavy stuff, and sometimes you just need a moment to breathe, a moment to take a pause. And if you're going to do that, you might as well do it with pause. So why did I set up this channel, and why did I develop the Hunter method? Well, I realised that if I was in my 40s and I was still not aware that I was subconsciously repeating toxic patterns from my childhood, and I was still not aware that I was feeding myself the 6 bad messages, then there must be many, many other people out there doing exactly the same thing. So when I at last had managed to find a way to stop my difficult childhood invading my adult life, I set up this channel and I wrote down the Hunter method. I wanted to help other people find a way around healing their childhoods. When I looked at my own healing, I was able to see that I developed a simple but practical framework for that to happen. And I wanted to share it with other people who are still stuck. I mean, I was stuck for years repeating toxic and abusive patterns, and my life was a disaster. It was really hard going. And only when I got into my 40s and I met that therapist did I learn why this was happening. So I wish I'd learned it earlier. So I set up this channel because I know there must be lots of people out there who are in the same situation as I was. And the framework, which I named the Hunter method, is again, it's a structured way of understanding and changing the toxic patterns that we develop from a difficult childhood. It's first and foremost a teaching and educational method, and it helps you see what is happening beneath the surface and why the same experiences keep happening again and again in your adult life. But again, understanding it on its own, it's not enough. Real change comes from practicing like nip and flip, noticing patterns, catching the bad messages, using tools like nip and flip again and again. You've got to work at it. It's not hard work, it's easy work, but once you know how to do it, you can start. And once you start doing the Hunter method, you really do begin to heal from your difficult childhood. And as I say, it's not an instant fix, it's a process. And with consistent practice, it can become a way to gradually change how you think, how you respond, and how you relate to yourself. And over time, this is what allows real healing from a difficult childhood to begin. My framework is designed to give you a clear and simple way to understand why you are stuck repeating toxic situations. Maybe you're not even aware of the subconscious forces controlling your life, but when you become aware of these forces by hopefully listening to the videos and then by using the Hunter method, you can then begin taking back control from the subconscious control that these forces have over you. If my therapist, Pat O'Connor, was able to make me aware that I was doing all this and the awareness changed my life for the better, then I think it's only right that I share this awareness with others, as this awareness may be the start of their healing too. Once you become aware that you have toxic forces operating in your life, you then have choices. And once you have choice, you have the opportunity to change your life for the better. So, welcome to my channel. I am glad you're here. Me and the 3 Wise Tales, we really care about you. In fact, I go as far as to say that we woof you. I know, that's a dreadful joke. Sorry about that. Thank you for listening, and I hope this helps.